It's story time. As a seasoned realtor, I had seen my fair share of houses, from cozy starter homes to sprawling estates. But nothing could have prepared me for the eerie experience that awaited me in the old, abandoned house at 13 Willow Street. The property had been on the market for years, its price steadily dropping as tales of paranormal activity spread throughout the town. Few dared to enter, let alone consider purchasing it. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and I had a pair of adventurous clients, the Allens, who were willing to take the risk if it meant securing a bargain. On the day of the showing, a chilly mist hung in the air, and a gloomy sky cast a pall over the neighborhood. The Allens arrived promptly, eager to explore their potential new home. Be prepared for a fixer-upper, I cautioned them as we approached the creaking front door. The previous owners abandoned it years ago, and it's been left to decay. The interior was a time capsule of neglect. Dust-covered furniture, draped in tattered sheets, sat in the dimly lit rooms. Cobwebs hung like veils, and the scent of decay lingered in the air. The Allens seemed unfazed, their eyes already gleaming with visions of renovation. As we explored the ground floor, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the broken windows, felt like a silent, haunting presence. I led the Allens up the grand staircase to the second floor, where the bedrooms were. It was there that the inexplicable began to unfold. In the master bedroom, as I extolled the potential for a grand restoration, the Allens froze, their eyes fixed on a seemingly ordinary mirror on the wall. But the reflection within was anything but ordinary. In the mirror's glass, a figure slowly materialized, an ethereal, pale woman dressed in a flowing white gown. Her eyes were hollow and filled with sadness, and her spectral hand reached out as if pleading for help. The Allens gasped in unison, and I turned to see the ghostly apparition for myself. My heart pounded as I watched the figure in the mirror, unable to comprehend what I was witnessing. Without warning, the figure vanished, leaving only a lingering chill in the room. The Allens and I exchanged frightened glances. "What was that?" Mrs. Allen whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, my own voice quivering. "But I think we should leave." We descended the staircase in haste, eager to put distance between ourselves and the unsettling presence we had encountered. The front door slammed shut behind us with a resounding finality, making us jump. Outside, the atmosphere seemed lighter, but the memory of the ghostly figure remained etched in our minds. The Allens decided against buying the house, and I couldn't blame them. As I locked the door one last time, a soft whisper echoed in my ears, a mournful, otherworldly voice that seemed to beckon me back into the darkness of the house. Over the following weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house at 13 Willow Street was calling to me. Night after night, I dreamed of the pale, sorrowful figure in the mirror, her eyes pleading for release. One evening, unable to resist the pull any longer, I returned to the abandoned house alone. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows that stretched across the property. I approached the front door with a mixture of trepidation and determination. Inside, the air felt charged with a supernatural energy, as though the house itself were alive and breathing. I climbed the grand staircase to the master bedroom, where the mirror still hung. As I gazed into the glass, the ghostly woman appeared once more. This time, she reached out and placed a spectral hand on the other side of the mirror, as if seeking a connection. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, and whispered, "What do you want?" The figure's hollow eyes met mine, and her voice, though faint, resonated in my mind. help me." It was then that I realized the truth. The spirit was trapped, tethered to the mirror by some unknown force. She had been waiting for someone, anyone, to set her free. With trembling hands, I began to research the history of the house, uncovering tales of tragedy and loss that seemed to align with the ghostly figure's presence. It appeared that she was the victim of a terrible injustice, and her restless spirit had been unable to move on. Over the course of several months, I worked tirelessly to unravel the mysteries of the house and find a way to release the spirit from her spectral prison. Each night, the figure in the mirror grew stronger, and her whispers became more coherent. Finally, after much research and with the help of a local paranormal expert, we performed as ants within the house. It was a risky endeavor, one that could have unpredictable consequences, but it was the only way to set the spirit free. As the ants reached its climax, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the ghostly figure emerged, her form becoming more solid with each passing moment. She looked at me with gratitude and then slowly faded away, her eyes finally filled with peace. The house at 13 Willow Street, once a place of darkness and despair, was forever changed. The Allens purchased it, determined to give it new life and a fresh start. As for me, I had learned that sometimes the most unexpected encounters could lead to the most profound discoveries. The sun hung low in the evening sky as I drove down the quiet suburban street, searching for the address of my next potential sale. I had been a realtor for years, and I prided myself on my ability to spot a diamond in the rough. The house at 27 Elmwood Avenue was the latest addition to my list of properties to check out. As I pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial, I couldn't help but notice how overgrown the front yard had become. The place had a certain charm, though the kind of charm that could be polished up and made to shine with a little TLC. I stepped out of my car and approached the front door, a feeling of anticipation building in my chest. This could be the listing I'd been waiting for, the one that would make my month. I reached for the doorknob and turned it, expecting to walk into an empty, albeit neglected, house. But as I pushed the door open, I was met with an unexpected sight. The interior was in disarray, furniture draped in dusty sheets, boxes stacked haphazardly in the corners, and the unmistakable signs of neglect everywhere. My heart sank at the thought of the work needed to make this house marketable. As I ventured further into the house, my unease grew. There was a strange odor in the air, a mixture of stale cigarette smoke and something far more pungent. The place was a mess, and it was clear that no one had lived here in quite some time. I continued my exploration, making my way through the ground floor. My footsteps echoed in the empty rooms, and a sense of desolation settled over me. This was going to be a tough sell. As I approached the entrance to the garage, I heard a sudden noise, a shuffling sound followed by a muffled curse. My heart raced as I realized I wasn't alone in the house. I cautiously made my way to the garage door, my mind racing with possibilities. Had someone broken in? Were they still here? With trembling hands, I slowly pushed the garage door open, revealing the dimly lit space beyond. My eyes scanned the area, taking in the cluttered mess of old tools and discarded furniture. And there, in the corner, huddled amidst a pile of cardboard boxes, was a disheveled figure. The man was a mess, a tangled beard, ripped up clothing, and wild, vacant eyes. He was filthy and reeked of alcohol and despair. It was clear that he had been squatting in the garage, seeking refuge from the harsh realities of life. Startled, the homeless man looked up at me with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Who are you?" he stammered. I'm a realtor, I replied, my voice steady, but my heart still pounding. I'm here to check out the property. His eyes narrowed, and I could see a glimmer of aggression in them. You shouldn't be here, he muttered, his voice growing more hostile. I took a step back, realizing that I was in a precarious situation. The homeless man seemed unstable, and I needed to be cautious. Just calm down, I said, trying to diffuse the tension. I won't call the police if you just leave quietly. But my words seemed to trigger something in him, and before I could react, he lunged at me, his filthy hands outstretched. Panic surged through me as I stumbled backward, trying to avoid his grasp. But my words seemed to trigger something in him, and before I could react, he lunged at me, his filthy hands outstretched. Panic surged through me as I stumbled backward, trying to avoid his grasp. We grappled in the dimly lit garage, our struggle echoing through the empty space. He was surprisingly strong, and I knew I needed to act fast. My eyes darted around the cluttered area, searching for something, anything, to defend myself with. That's when I spotted it, a 2x4 wooden plank that had been left by the previous owners. Without hesitation, I lunged for it and swung it at the homeless man with all the force I could muster. The plank connected with a sickening thud, and the man crumpled to the ground unconscious. My heart was still racing as I stood there, breathing heavily. I had no choice but to call the police now. Moments later, sirens wailed in the distance, and a pair of officers arrived at the scene. They quickly assessed the situation, cuffing the unconscious man and placing him in the back of their patrol car. One of the officers turned to me, concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my hands still trembling. "I'm fine." He just surprised me. They took my statement and assured me that the man would be dealt with appropriately. As they drove away with the homeless intruder in tow, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. I would never forget the day I encountered an unwelcome guest in that house, but I was determined to move forward, ready to face whatever challenges my career as a realtor would bring. I'm a full-time realtor. I love my job because I get to see beautiful homes, and I also get to work with great clients. The prospective buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, were eager to see the property, despite its rumored supernatural history. They were a well-to-do couple, looking for a house that would reflect their status and provide them with the privacy they desired. Blackwood Manor seemed to fit the bill perfectly. As I waited on the porch for the Andersons to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The rain continued to fall, forming a melancholic backdrop to the ominous atmosphere that seemed to hang over the house. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson arrived promptly, their sleek black sedan pulling into the circular driveway. They were an attractive couple, impeccably dressed and exuding an air of sophistication. "Good afternoon," I greeted them with a forced smile as they stepped out of their car. "Hello," Mr. Anderson replied, shaking my hand firmly. "We're quite excited to see the house." "Absolutely," Mrs. Anderson added, her eyes scanning the imposing structure before us. "It has a certain charm, doesn't it?" We made our way inside, and as I unlocked the front door and led them into the grand foyer, I couldn't help but notice their enthusiasm. Perhaps the stories of hauntings were just that, stories. The interior of the house was as impressive as its exterior. The foyer opened up into a vast, high-ceilinged space with a sweeping staircase leading to the upper floors. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft, ethereal light over the polished wooden floors. We began our tour of the house, starting with the spacious living room. The Andersons admired the intricate molding, the marble fireplace, and the tall windows that allowed in the faint gray light. Despite the gloomy day outside, the room felt warm and inviting. As we moved through the house, I explained its history, the various owners it had seen over the decades, each with their own stories and secrets. The Andersons listened intently, their interest piqued. However, as we ascended the grand staircase to explore the bedrooms on the second floor, a sudden chill descended upon the air. I watched as Mr. Anderson shivered, his breath forming frosty clouds in front of him. "Is it always this cold in here?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of unease. I couldn't deny that the temperature seemed to have dropped noticeably, and I was beginning to feel a chill myself. "It's an old house," I offered as an explanation, though I knew that wasn't the entire truth. We continued our tour, but the chill seemed to follow us, even into the master bedroom. Mrs. Anderson mentioned hearing faint whispers, and I dismissed them as the creaking of an old house settling. As we made our way to the third floor, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The Andersons became more subdued, their earlier enthusiasm waning. I had almost convinced myself that it was just their nerves getting the best of them when we reached the top of the stairs. The third floor was unlike the rest of the house, dark, dusty, and filled with an air of foreboding. The narrow hallway stretched ahead of us, lined with doors leading to bedrooms that hadn't been touched in decades. I could see the trepidation in Mr. Anderson's eyes as he hesitated before one of the doors. "Shall we take a look?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, pulling the door open slowly. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, and I reached for the light switch, but nothing happened. The room remained pitch black, and a sense of dread washed over us. As we strained our eyes to see, the room seemed to come to life. The air was thick with whispers, indistinct voices that seemed to echo from all directions. Shadows danced along the walls, and I could hear the Andersons breathing heavily. Mrs. Anderson clutched her husband's arm, her voice trembling. "We should leave. Now." We retreated from the room, back into the dimly lit hallway. The oppressive atmosphere lifted as we descended the staircase, and the chill in the air dissipated. In the living room, the Andersons turned to me, their faces pale. "Thank you for showing us the house," Mr. Anderson said, his tone polite but hurried. "But I think we've seen enough." I nodded, understanding their decision. We made our way to the front door, and as I opened it, I couldn't help but glance back at Blackwood Manor. It stood there, silent and foreboding, its secrets hidden behind its dark walls. The rain had stopped, and a weak ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the house for a brief moment. It seemed to shimmer, as if the very walls held the memories and echoes of the past. As the Andersons stepped outside, they seemed relieved to be away from the house. I closed the door behind us, and we stood there for a moment, silent and contemplative. "Thank you," Mrs. Anderson said finally, her voice a mixture of gratitude and relief. "But we won't be buying this house." As I watched the Andersons drive away, I couldn't help but wonder about the history that shrouded the house. The whispers, the shadows, the unexplainable cold, all of it left me with a sense of unease.